Hey everyone, welcome to a deep dive.
Into rework.
Yeah, a book that just throws the whole traditional business playbook out the window and kind of says,
There's a different way.
yeah, there's a different way to do this. And um, we've got the book itself, of course, and we've also got an audio excerpt. So we're going to be hearing like the authors themselves talking about this stuff.
Bringing these ideas to life.
Exactly. So get ready to kind of rethink work because we are diving into ReWork by Jason Fried and David Heinemeier Hansson. I always mess up the last name.
And Hansson, yeah.
Hansson. Okay. And these authors don't just talk the talk. They built a successful company based on these principles, 37 signals.
Yeah, you know what I liked about that? Is that it wasn't just like theory, they've actually done this.
They've put it into practice.
Yeah, and so one of the things that really struck me right off the bat was their take on this whole real world thing. Like how people will say,
Oh, it won't work in the real world.
yeah, exactly. Have you ever noticed that? It's so common, and it's almost like a defense mechanism, a way to deflect from having to try something new.
Interesting.
They call out the real world as a convenient scapegoat for either laziness or resistance to change, or maybe just fear of failure.
That's true. I hadn't thought about it that way.
And they challenge us to question, what limitations are we putting on ourselves?
Just because we're afraid to step outside that box, right?
Exactly, because we're afraid to kind of like go against the grain of how it's supposed to be done.
Yeah. And they have this whole thing about learning from success, not failure. Most people talk about like,
Fail fast, learn from your mistakes.
exactly. But they flip it.
Yeah, they make the case that success is actually a better teacher. Now, that may sound a little counterintuitive at first.
Yeah, to me at first I was like, wait, what?
But think about it from an evolutionary perspective.
Okay.
We evolve by building on what works, right? If something succeeds, there's a reason why, and we can learn from studying those wins.
More than from dissecting the failures, I guess.
Exactly. Rework also takes a pretty bold stance against something you'd think is business gospel. Long-term planning.
Yeah, because like every business book you pick up, it's like, you've got to have your 5-year plan. But they're just like, no.
They call it guesswork. Trying to predict the future when market conditions are shifting, technology's evolving, and your own priorities might change.
I mean, I guess it makes sense. It does seem kind of impossible to predict that far out, right?
It is, and what they propose instead is being adaptable. Instead of getting bogged down in trying to foresee every possible scenario, focus on what you can control. Short-term goals.
So it's more like navigating by sight rather than sticking to a map that might already be outdated.
Precisely, it's being responsive, agile. Like, imagine a jazz musician improvising a solo.
Ooh, I like that.
They've got the framework, but there's freedom to adapt in the moment.
That's a good analogy. Then they've got this section on the value of staying small. Isn't the whole point of business to like grow?
That's the conventional wisdom. But rework challenges that. Companies should aim for their optimal size, the size that allows them to be the best at what they do. And they use a great example, institutions like Harvard or Oxford. They've stayed relatively small, but their impact, their reputation, huge.
So it's about being excellent at what you do, not just being the biggest.
Right, because bigger isn't always better. Sometimes when companies grow too quickly.
They lose sight of like what they were good at to begin with.
Exactly. They get spread too thin. Quality suffers.
And speaking of things that can really backfire, ReWork has some pretty strong opinions about workaholism. They don't mince words.
No, they don't. They literally call it stupid.
They do.
They argue that workaholism actually leads to burnout, poor judgment, and it creates an unhealthy work environment overall.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that firsthand. People who are just grinding themselves into the ground thinking it's like a badge of honor. But really, it's
counterproductive.
yeah, and it can even lead to making bigger mistakes because you're just so burnt out.
Absolutely. Rework emphasizes working smarter, not longer, set boundaries, prioritize tasks, focus on the output, not just the hours.
So intentional work,
Yeah.
not just grinding away for the sake of it.
Right. And you know what I really love? One of my favorite ideas from Rework is scratch your own itch.
Oh yeah, tell me about that one.
It's all about creating something you genuinely need or want.
So if you have that problem, probably other people have that problem too.
Exactly. And they give great examples in the book. James Dyson, frustrated with his vacuum losing suction, so what did he do?
Invented the bagless vacuum.
Right. Or Vic Firth, a timpanist who couldn't find perfectly matched drumsticks.
He was like, well, fine, I'll just make my own.
And so many successful businesses have been born out of that. Someone saying, I need this, and if I need it, others probably do too.
That's really cool. It almost makes you want to think about, like, what are those problems that I have that maybe Like, I could turn into a business, right?
Right. Absolutely. It sparks that entrepreneurial spirit. And, that leads us to another rework principle that might seem a little counterintuitive at first, embracing constraints.
Because you'd think, constraints, why would I want that?
Right. But rework argues that limitations can actually fuel creativity, force you to be resourceful.
Mm-hmm.
Like they use the example of prisoners. They have to get creative, right? Make weapons out of soap or spoons.
Oh,
When you're forced to work within those limitations.
you have to think outside the box.
Exactly. Think of Shakespeare's sonnets. Strict structure, right? Or Southwest Airlines. They only use one type of aircraft.
So sometimes having those constraints forces you to be more focused and make hard choices, but that can actually,
To lead to a better outcome.
yeah, maybe that's a better strategy in the long run. And they have this other thing where they talk about how good enough is fine, which might freak some people out.
Because people might hear that and think they're endorsing shoddy work, but
Right. But what they really mean is,
what they really mean is launch sooner rather than later, even if it's not perfect.
oh, interesting.
Because getting feedback, iterating, is more valuable than spending years trying to achieve some impossible ideal of perfection.
I can definitely relate to that. I get so caught up in wanting something to be perfect before I, like, release it into the world. So you're saying it's better to just put it out there and then get feedback.
They argue that, yes, especially in today's world, speed can be a major advantage. Don't let perfectionism be a roadblock.
So it's about striking that balance, not letting perfect be the enemy of good, right?
Exactly. And rework also dives into something that I think a lot of people struggle with, building an audience.
Because it's easy to think, oh, I'll just make something and then, like, everyone will come. But it doesn't really work that way, does it?
It rarely does. They advocate for creating valuable content consistently that attracts a loyal following. They use their own blog, Signal versus Noise, as a prime example.
It's like building that trust and authority
Yeah.
so people seek you out.
Exactly. Not just shouting into the void hoping someone hears you, but actually building a community.
I like that. And then they have this idea of out-teaching your competition, which, again, at first you're like, wait, what? Are you supposed to keep your secrets?
Right. But they say, share your knowledge, share your expertise.
Really?
It sets you apart, positions you as a thought leader.
Interesting.
They give examples like the Feller Type Foundry. They teach workshops on typography
Oh,
or
yeah.
Etsy, empowering their sellers with educational resources. It's adding value, not just a hard sell.
So it's more about building that relationship and that trust
Mm-hmm.
than just, like, trying to get people to buy something.
Right. And finally, rework has a unique take on marketing, they say. It's not just a department.
It's everything you do.
Exactly how you answer the phone, respond to emails, your website design, every interaction.
It's like you're always sending a message.
Always. They even give very specific examples. Answer the phone cheerfully, write clear website copy, even craft helpful error messages.
Error messages.
Yeah.
Really.
Because even those are opportunities to reinforce your brand.
It's like that saying, you never get a second chance to make a first impression,
And with rework, they're saying that everything you do is part of that first impression.
whether you realize it or not.
Absolutely. It's about being intentional about the message you're putting out there.
Yeah, really thinking about all the little details. And speaking of challenging assumptions, ReWork also takes on this idea of, outside funding.
Especially early on.
Yeah, they're big proponents of bootstrapping, right? Like, start small, use your own resources.
They argue that taking on outside money, especially in the early stages, can actually stifle your growth.
Really? You would think it would be the opposite.
It's tempting to think, oh, more money, more resources, but
Yeah.
it can lead to a loss of control, pressure to grow prematurely.
And then you're beholden to those investors.
You're
with that.
focused on pleasing them instead of your customers.
So it's like, stay scrappy, stay focused.
Stay true to your vision.
Yeah, I like that. And they have this whole thing about building to keep, not building to flip, which is kind of a different mindset.
It is. Most startup advice is all about what's your exit strategy.
Yeah, like get acquired or go public. But they're saying
Build something you want to keep,
you want to nurture it.
something with long-term value, a legacy, not just a quick payday.
That's cool. And this ties back to their idea of embracing constraints, right? Like having less can actually force you to be more creative.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
Exactly. When you have limited resources, you have to figure out how to,
Maximize what you have.
yeah. And they talk about building half a product, not a half-assed product. What do they mean by that?
Focus on doing a few things exceptionally well.
Instead of trying to be everything to everyone.
Exactly.
No.
Prioritize, make those tough choices.
So quality over quantity.
Absolutely. And when it comes to making those choices, rework encourages a bias towards action.
So just make a decision, even if you don't have all the information.
They argue that it's better to move forward than to get stuck in endless analysis.
Oh, that analysis paralysis.
Exactly. Make a decision, adjust course as you go. And speaking of things that can drag on forever,
Like those giant, never-ending projects.
break those down into smaller, manageable chunks.
So you can get those quick wins and keep that momentum going.
Exactly. And again, launch sooner, iterate. They're all about getting things out there in the world. And, another thing they take aim at is meetings.
Oh yeah, everyone hates meetings.
You don't mince words. They say most meetings are a colossal waste of time.
Yeah, I think we've all been in those, pointless meetings that could have been an email.
Right. So their solution is have fewer meetings, keep them short, laser focused.
And only invite the people who absolutely need to be there.
Exactly. Quality over quantity. And along those same lines, they talk about protecting your alone time.
Which is so hard these days, with everyone being constantly connected.
It is. But rework recognizes that interruptions are productivity killers.
Yeah, you get in that flow, and then bam, someone IMs you.
They say, carve out those blocks of uninterrupted time.
Actually schedule it in your calendar.
Exactly. Set those boundaries for yourself and others.
It's amazing how much more productive you can be when you actually have that focused time, right?
It's huge. And here's another one that might seem counterintuitive. Ignore your competitors.
Wait, what? Isn't it business 101 to always be analyzing the competition?
It is. But rework argues that focusing too much on them can actually distract you from your own vision.
Oh, that makes sense.
Instead of trying to copy what everyone else is doing, focus on what makes you unique.
So be authentic, be you.
Exactly. They even suggest picking a fight.
Actually fighting with your competitors.
Not literally, of course,
Yeah.
but clearly define what you stand for, what you're against.
Oh, so have a strong point of view and don't be afraid to challenge the status quo.
Exactly. It's about having a backbone, not just a product. And along those same lines, they talk about underdoing the competition.
What does that mean?
Focus on doing a few things exceptionally well, rather than trying to match them feature for feature.
So again, quality over quantity.
Simplicity over complexity.
Less is more.
Exactly. And now let's talk about promotion, getting the word out. ReWork has some pretty strong opinions about press releases.
They're not a fan, are they?
They call them spam.
Wow. Okay.
Generic pitches blasted out to hundreds of journalists hoping something sticks.
Like throwing spaghetti at the wall.
Exactly. Instead, build genuine relationships with journalists.
Oh, so it's more about targeted outreach.
Yes. Craft personalized pitches that highlight what's truly newsworthy.
So do something remarkable and let the press come to you.
Exactly. And they also recommend teaching as a form of promotion.
So sharing your expertise, offering valuable content.
Exactly. Positioning yourself as a thought leader.
I like that. It's a much more subtle and, I guess, sustainable approach.
It is. Now let's dive into hiring, because ReWork throws out the traditional rule book there too. They're not big on resumes, years of experience.
So what are they looking for?
Skills, attitude, cultural fit.
More than just what's on paper.
Exactly. They want people who are passionate, adaptable.
People who are a good fit, not just people who look good on paper.
And they suggest test driving employees.
Like a trial run.
Exactly. Give them real projects, see their skills in action.
That makes so much sense. See how they actually perform, not just how they interview.
Absolutely. And all of this leads to their philosophy on company culture.
Which they have a very specific definition of, right?
They do. They say culture isn't something you can force. It's a byproduct of consistent behavior.
It's not about the ping pong tables and the free snacks.
It's about how you work, the unspoken rules, how you treat each other.
The values, the vibe, the feeling.
Exactly. And they suggest focusing on trust, autonomy, responsibility.
Give people ownership. Let them do their best work.
Create an environment where they feel valued. And that all ties into clear communication.
Yeah, they're big on that, right?
Huge, simple, straightforward language, no jargon.
Just like the writing advice. Be real, be human, be conversational.
Sound like yourself, not some faceless corporation.
Let your personality shine through. And finally, they remind us that inspiration is perishable.
Don't wait for the perfect moment, act now.
Strike while the iron is hot.
Because inspiration is fleeting. Capture it, nurture it, turn it into action.
Don't let it fade away.
Even if the idea isn't fully formed, start putting it into action. Learn as you go.
So embrace that iterative process. Be willing to experiment.
Exactly. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about damage control. ReWork has a pretty radical approach to dealing with bad news.
Like when things go wrong.
They advocate for transparency, honesty, even when it's painful.
So own your mistakes.
Apologize sincerely. Take action to fix things. No hiding, no PR
It's
spin.
almost like be human about it,
Exactly. People can sense when you're being genuine.
even if you messed up.
They're more likely to forgive you.
That's true. And they also talk about responding quickly, right? Like speed matters.
It's crucial. Address those customer issues promptly, efficiently.
Show them you care.
It makes all the difference in how they perceive the situation.
So it's not just what you say, it's when you say it.
And of course, what you do about it.
Actions speak louder than words.
Absolutely. They also talk about personalized customer service.
Everyone in the company should have experience dealing with customers directly.
They suggest that, yes.
So no matter what your role is,
You understand the customer's perspective.
that's like company-wide empathy.
Exactly. And that ties into their whole philosophy of flexibility, adaptability,
They encourage companies to view decisions as temporary.
not permanent.
So be willing to experiment, iterate, adapt as you go.
Exactly. Don't get stuck searching for the perfect solution.
Make the best decision you can with what you know.
And be willing to change course if you need to.
So it's okay to pivot.
Absolutely. They argue it's better to make a decision and change later.
Than to never make a decision at all.
Right. Don't get paralyzed by overthinking.
It's about momentum, keeping things moving.
Embrace the uncertainty. Be open to change.
That seems to be a recurring theme in ReWork, right?
It is. It's about being agile, responsive.
Especially in today's world, where things are constantly changing.
Yeah, it's a must. And I think that's a great takeaway from ReWork overall. It's a call to action, a challenge to rethink work and business.
It's definitely thought-provoking, full of these unconventional ideas.
And hopefully it inspires people to try new things, challenge the status quo.
Because there's no one-size-fits-all approach, right?
Exactly. What works for one company might not work for another.
It's about finding what works for you, your team, your specific situation.
Build a business you're passionate about
That reflects your values.
and makes a positive impact. I think that's what they're getting at.
Yeah, and so to wrap things up, I think the key takeaway from ReWork is don't be afraid to question conventional wisdom.
Experiment. Find your own path.
Build a business that you're truly proud of.
Work smarter, not harder.
And create a more meaningful way to do business.
Well said. Maybe you'll even spark some rework moments of your own.
That's what we're hoping for. And as always, we want to hear from you. What unconventional idea from ReWork resonated with you? What are you going to try differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's keep this conversation going.